And welcome to Tech and Test with me, Peter Johnson. Today on the show, we have Kevin Roe. Kevin, welcome to Tech and Test. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Do you want to introduce yourself to the Tech and Test audience? I know you. Some people should know you. Who are you?
Oh, thank you. My name is Kevin Roe. I'm a senior software engineer and test at Ramsey Solutions in Franklin, Tennessee.
Awesome. So thank you for coming on. And some of the topics I want to talk about today is you're obviously an SDET, right? Or software engineering test, or a whole bunch of acronyms for this. But something that I've been thinking about quite a bit is where is this role going to, right? It's quite an old role, the SDET role. It started off back in Microsoft many, many years ago. And if we sort of think about the role now compared to maybe when we first started working as an SDET, there's been a lot of change, right? And the change hasn't just been technology in the sense of the technology we've been testing. I think the work we do and how we work has fundamentally changed with the SDET role. And I'm quite curious to see what your thoughts are in terms of, there's always been newer technology that's come, right? Automation has been one of those big technologies, and now AI has been another one. Where do you think, or what do you currently think the current SDET role is? What are the big things that stick out of staying around and things which maybe we're doing less of?
So I think the big thing that we have now, especially with AI, is this incredible opportunity to leverage the superpower that we've already had, or that we've had for a long period of time. And I think we've confused that superpower with automation, with writing test scripts. We've kind of given up. I think a lot of ways we've given up that idea of risk analysis and proper testing and being able to speak into multiple areas of the businesses that we work in favor of just saying, hey, we need to get the tickets across the line, right? So we have a ticket that comes in and we pull it and we test it and we write tests for it and we give the green light or the thumbs up and we say, we're done, and we move on to the next thing. We've kind of been caught in that kind of rat race of Agile, right? Or whatever, Scrum, Kanban, whatever flavor that kind of looks like, and that kind of focus on iterations and the development process and all of that. It's kind of, sorry, I hit the mic there. And that's been fine because we've adapted to the circumstances that we were handed. And the developers have done the same things too. Developers who've been old school, who've said, hey, I really rely on having specifications. I need to have my everything has to be spelled out. I need to have, what color is this button going to be? What's my database columns, right? They've had to have all of those details in that kind of waterfall mentality. Now they've shifted, well, with Agile and Scrum, they've shifted to, being able to think more on the fly with this ticket. Here's the requirements, how you implement it is up to you. And that's been really good, I think, because at the end of the day, I think the customers don't care, what frameworks you use and kind of how that works. So it's helped us as an industry to move faster, which is really, really great. Now, here comes the 9 million pound elephant in the room, which is AI. And everybody's freaking out about it. And I think this is absolutely insane because this is the first, I think, I'm not that old, but this feels like the first major technology shift in the last 50 years that has directly influenced for the negative the tech industry, right? Or from a career job perspective. Think of when computers in the 90s, when the personal computer boom, right? There was you want to learn to be a programmer, there's all these places that are hiring because everybody's buying computers, and the internet comes out. Oh, everybody needs a website. So, and all these, weird companies that have never been technology companies all of a sudden start building websites, and that's been cool. And then mobile comes along, and wow, everybody's got a supercomputer in their pocket. And then, so mobile web apps and mobile sites and responsive and e-commerce and all this stuff is just blowing up, and jobs are everywhere. And then AI hits, and now what does the future look like? We don't know, and that's scary. It really is scary.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm laughing. It's pretty nerves that's coming out.
Yeah.
Actually, I think there's two ways of looking at it, right? Like, one way is we can be very nervous about it, and we can go, yes, maybe we've studied a long time to pick up skills which are employable. On the other hand, we're fundamentally as testers or as SDETs, we've been hired to really help projects and be like the headlights of a project and help identify risk and identify
absolutely
really where the risk is within the business, right? And I think testing has always been that, but we as like engineers have always latched onto the tools. I think we've interweaved our identity with building tools, building code, building frameworks, building dashboards, building things,
Yeah.
because I think it's fun, right? It's fun to
It
do.
is 100%. And that's something that is once you learn how to do it, you feel included in the big boys club. You know what I mean? So those guys, especially as testers, and I can speak to that. I did not go to college to be an engineer or to be a tester or whatever it is that I would call myself now. I went to school to be a pastor. Like, I'm in a completely different field than I am in now. And so when I get to build a framework, or when I'm working on a library now to kind of migrate some of our automation tests into a new world, and there's this like sense of accomplishment that, I built that. That is great. I'm a tester and I'm building stuff, and that's really, really exciting. But at the end of the day, that's not, as a tester, that's not what I should consider my superpower to be, which is
Right.
what you talked about, which was risk analysis and being able to think about where can things go wrong? What are the edge cases? What are things that people haven't thought of? You've got guys like product managers who are supposed to think with their heads in the cloud, right? Like, what can we build? What possibilities are out there? What new opportunities are out there? What problems can we solve? And that's awesome. You need those people
100%.
who are just brilliant at coming up with the next big thing, right? And then you need people who are able to say, hey, that's an awesome idea. Here's where that could fall down. Have we considered this edge case? Have we considered this problem? Have we considered this? When we build it, if we don't architect it with this in mind, it won't scale, right? You need to have people who can think about risk and problems that not everybody thinks about. And I honestly think that really is the QA superpower. Whatever you want to call SDET, software engineer and test, QA, QE, automation, whatever it is, if you are involved in the testing process, your power, your superpower, your skill isn't the automation scripts, isn't Selenium, Appium, Playwright, Cypress, HP Quality Center, or whatever, whoever owns them now, I'm not even sure. That's not your skill. Your skill is being able to say, what is the worst thing that could happen? And how do we mitigate it? How do we fix it? What's our rollback strategy? What's the potential hit to our brand if we're a public facing company and, we have users who know the actual product that we make and it goes haywire? What's that going to do to our brand? So even if it's not a big technical risk, if it goes down for a day, that's going to really hurt our company. We like to talk about that our company operates on the speed of trust. So if we consider ourselves to be very trustworthy to our users. And so if we don't think about that from a trust perspective, we take that very seriously. So someone has to say, hey guys, even if our website goes down or our app or our whatever it is goes down for couple of hours, our budgets will be fine. People are still going to renew. Fine, but they won't trust us anymore.
Right.
And that's a big problem. So you need to have people who are thinking through all layers of risk and think, what is the worst thing that could happen? And I think that's the ultimate QA superpower that I think we have to reclaim in a world of AI.
Yes. And actually, I think AI is going to be that technology that will force us to latch onto our history, right? Of like, what's always been a critical skill, like the critical thinking skills that come into QA and the kind of analytical thinking that we apply as like QA engineers has always been there. But we've always been distracted with building things with technology because we've had to, right? But now AI and controlling agents and, using Claude or using other agents and multi-agents to kind of do a whole bunch of work for us gives us that opportunity to step back and think a bit more. Where in the past, we didn't necessarily have that level of, let's say, computes available to kind of, we were bounded by how many lines of code someone could type on a keyboard, or we don't have that bound anymore. So now we can almost extend our consciousness around, if I'm going to call it consciousness, around quality, right? So if anything, I definitely see that. But I also see the opposite, where people do identify very closely with being the tool person, right? The tool maker.
Yeah.
And I do see a lot of people in fear when that's all they do is, okay, my identity's been lost, right? And I think we were talking off call, if you've spent a significant amount of time studying something and you've got a lot of experience in it, and then suddenly you see a new flashy tool that comes in that can do that for you with AI support. Of course, people are going to be skeptical with, is this actually going to be sufficient? Is it going to work? But fundamentally, I think we need to sort of embrace the new technology and realize it's not going anywhere. So we need to focus on where do we add value within a business and how can we find those issues? So it does need like a mindset shift.
Yeah. And I think that fear that you were talking about has, for one thing, it's happening everywhere. I think in almost every industry now. At my company, we're talking about, Claude Design just came out. What about our designers? How is this going to impact them? Project managers, what about building new dashboards and new ways of tracking as workflows through the pipeline? What about product managers, like I talked about, with coming up with new ways of ideation and new ways of getting things out to customers? What about rapid prototyping? And now a product manager can sit in front of a keyboard with Claude Code and build an actual working prototype of something. Whether or not a customer ever sees it, they're able to then present those ideas to the stakeholders in a very clear and direct way, where they'll be able to say, no, this is exactly the thing that I think we should build. And hey, why don't we get out in front of like 5 or 10 users? Claude, or AI, really has changed every industry. And like I said, it's weird for us because we never expected it to happen, I think, to our industry. And so that really is scary, but it does present a lot of opportunities. It does present to what does getting back to the basics really look like. The middle of a great number of jobs are going to be completely automated by AI. But the beginning and the end, that's a whole nother conversation. That ideation phase of coming up with the new products, coming up with the new ways of doing things, or kind of not confronting, that's not the word, looking at the business and saying, what are those new things? What are those new opportunities to go after? Even if you can think of 5 or 6 or 7, you put those into Claude and it says, hey, have you thought of this other thing that's related to that? And you're like, oh, wow, I hadn't considered that. And so that's the beginning of that process. And then the end of that process, that's where we step in, I think, as testers, to be able to say, cool, you've built the thing. Now let's test the thing. And that testing could take any number of different ways that could look. We can have, I think right now, I mean, who knows what the next 5 years, but right now there's great opportunity to lean into security testing and performance testing, observability, real user data, real user monitoring, accessibility testing. There's all sorts of really cool things that fall under that kind of umbrella of testing that AI is just not doing. And maybe
Right.
Claude could do 80% of it, but you have to direct Claude to do that 80%, and then you fill in the gaps for wherever it's missing. And again, all of that kind of falls under that superpower of risk analysis and viewing things through a different lens that other people would miss. And that's really the skill that we should develop.
Yes. 100% on the. Actually, I think in one way, our roles are expanding in that dimension. So,
They really are.
We can use Claude to create, Prometheus metrics or open telemetry metrics, Grafana, whatever. Now, that would have been usually in the realm of a different role potentially, right? But as an SDET, we can see that as a risk, and we can start to like put in those metrics in the back end, nothing stopping us doing that, and making sure like we can do chaos testing, right? Chaos engineering, and kind of check things are working under weird conditions. Right? What happens if we turn off all these Kubernetes pods, right? Kubernetes pods, do they like just restore? Do they respawn? Do they break? What happens on the different load conditions? All these sort of like performance testing is critical and has always been critical. But now we can almost do more work with AI and be more kind of abundant with like the risk we want to target, right? I think.
Yeah.
And I think
we talk, AI really is an accelerator. It's as good as you are, and it can make you, well, it's better than you are, let's be honest, but you still have to direct it to be able to accomplish the thing that you wanted to do, right? It's in a lot of ways a rapid fire machine gun going everywhere. And it's your job to point it into one place. And only you can really do that because you're the one that's got the business context and the knowledge of what needs to be done today. It's just, it's Claude doesn't know what your business needs. Claude knows how to take your business needs and direct it toward a goal that you direct. But you are the only ones that have that kind of knowledge that can really accelerate that. This is the weird thing, like who can do coding is the thing people are asking. What about, can product managers do coding with Claude? Well, yeah, kind of, but they're never going to be as good as an actual software engineer. And the same thing is very true of testing. Can a product manager do testing with AI? Yeah, never going to be as good as you are with your skills that you've developed and those critical thinking skills that you've developed over years of kind of battle hardened and in the trenches of things you've seen go wrong.
Yes. And this sort of brings the point of like experience becomes very valuable in some ways. So if you can use that experience and you can use AI to be very productive, then you almost have like a win-win situation where you can be more productive than you would have been without AI, but you're really depending on that experience to give you the correct
Mm-hmm.
decision making that you need in order to get the outcomes you want. So
Yeah.
it can reinforce our experience. But I think the issue becomes when people don't adopt these tools or don't have the opportunity, or you may work for an organization which is not AI native or not going down that direction. And then you may end up a little bit stuck in the industry where you've not been using AI tools and you've been doing things a bit old fashioned ways in terms of handwriting code, every single statement by hand. And in some cases,
It's weird to hear handwriting code as old fashioned, but that's the crazy thing.
it's true. I mean, there's going to be a spectrum here, right? Or chasm
for
in
sure.
terms of like, in some industries, I imagine, where security is very important or, national security is really important. You may not want to let the robots at your code base.
Exactly.
And so you may still have programmers who actually write code by hand and it's all reviewed by hand because the risk, can we go back to risk? The risk of it going wrong is so large and, no one wants to think about it. So no, we need to use formal methods for maybe doing this. But for the majority of software, I think, if you start using AI tools, there's almost no going back because the productivity gains, if used correctly, are just so high.
Yeah, and here's the crazy thing is that the barrier to entry for learning AI is unbelievably low. It's never been this low ever. Like to learn programming 10 or 15 years ago, you had YouTube, you had Udemy courses, you had books. I mean, they weren't a CS degree, I guess is my point, is that those were readily accessible tools. And even before that, to learn, I'm picturing like, imagine you were going back to that kind of factory automation thing, that if you were working on the line 100 years ago in a factory and then they bring in a machine to kind of do your job, the ability to learn how to repair and maintain that machine is very complicated because in order to do that, you have to spend time with the machine. They have to close the like learning that skill is very, very hard. And 15 people want to do it and only one guy is going to get it, right? So it was hard to kind of get into those different spaces. Now with AI, a $20 a month Claude Pro subscription on your own time is wildly powerful to learn how to use AI. You can also ask AI, how could I have used you better? Imagine asking the robot that replaced your job, how do I use you better? And it says, well, I mean, it's a bizarre concept. I've had Claude that's funny. I've had Claude not do the thing that I asked it to do. It's like I had a rule in my rules directory or something that's you need to always do this. And it executed a task and didn't do something that I thought that it should have. And so I asked it, why did this is in my rules or this is the skill, how come you didn't do it the way that I expected? And it responded, well, the file was too big. It truncated some of that context in order to fit everything in. Right. So I made those two separate files and fixed the problem. I mean, Claude is an incredible, or AI, I keep saying Claude because it's what I use every day. AI is a remarkable tool for learning, for debugging, for getting better at your job. If you're a tester and you have that superpower of testing and you're leaning into that, I think that should be the number one thing you lean into in order to kind of make yourself AI proof. But in the meantime, you want to get better at programming. You have a merge request or a pull request that a dev has put in and you want to say, hey, how can I approach that from a risk perspective? I want to analyze that and from a code perspective, not just from a success criteria perspective, what it's doing. You can point your AI toward that MR and say, tell me where the problems are. Walk me through the code. Help me to understand what it's doing. Hey, I see this arrow. I'm learning code, but I don't know what that arrow means. Oh, that's a Lambda function. And it can explain to you what a Lambda function is. You can explain like I'm 5. There's any number of different ways you could take how you need to have it explain and have it explain it in that way. Hey, I need a picture. Sure, here's a picture. And it'll spin up some SVG and explain it through flowcharts. Or I don't quite understand it. Give me a real world analogy of what this kind of function is. Oh, so you need learned inheritance. Well, inheritance would be best described as a cat is an animal, but an animal isn't a cat, right? And so it can explain things and concepts that you can really understand if that's something you're struggling with. So AI is this incredible opportunity to learn and grow if you take advantage of it. Because it can be, we were talking about our identities earlier, it can be very, very easy to just say, this is taking my job away and I'm going to fight it. You're that guy fighting the machine tooth and nail and say, I will beat this. And you might probably won't, right? The better thing to do is to say,
Yeah.
how can I use this to supercharge what I'm already good at and get better at that and get better at the areas that I'm weaker in? Make yourself
Yeah.
valuable in that way.
Actually, I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? Now with this age of AI era, I think what people need is a shift in just mindset. I think we have the technology, we have the tools, we have everything in place. And we're just seeing like the old world of how we learnt and the new world of how we can learn just kind of interchanging. And we're getting I think some people are getting a bit caught up in like, which is the best way? Should I do a college degree and do things the old fashioned way? Or should I realize now we have all the tools available at our disposal, with creating code? I mean, I love that analogy about the factory machine. Going to ask the robot that's going to replace you, how could I have used you better? I mean, that's classic. But actually, we have like a personal tutor available to us, right? Back in, if you pick up a book, you have those authors' opinions, and there may be some good opinions based on experience, but they may not necessarily jive with your learning style. And I think we now have...
And the guy that you go to work for may have a different opinion too.
Exactly. So, yeah, if anything, there's more opportunity now than there's ever been. It's so... The bar is so, at the moment, AI, these Claude agent, tools are quite cheap. They're like $20, $30 a month, whatever. At some point, if they did go up in price, then there may be some more issues with like accessibility and getting them.
Yeah.
At the moment, let's just take advantage of what's there and try to use it as much as possible. The danger could be though, if these agents are all doing too much of my work for me because I'm just, overseeing their work, planning their work, controlling them, and using my experience to kind of do that. How much of my knowledge is actually being, eroded with, let's say, if I'm doing more of the higher level thinking of what we're trying to build, am I going to notice that lookup is now taking an extra CPU cycle because I'm not focusing so much on the syntax as I was before? If you're handwriting code, you may go, this actual assignment is now causing an extra lookup time, right? Because it unnecessarily in the language I'm using, you may not be so idiomatic in every single language. Whereas if you're hand coding things, you may be a bit more conscious and careful with the syntax you're writing. So I just wonder if we're going to be losing some of those skills.
Yeah, that's honestly something, and I'd love to get your opinion on this too. This is something I've been concerned about thinking about AI. It's so easy. I'm sure you've ran into this too, where it is so easy, scary easy actually, to just turn your brain off and just go for hours on end and just think, I need to get this task done because I've got lunch in a couple hours. I want to try to knock this out. Sure, let's take it. I'll review it in the EMR process or, whatever. And what my concern is, and that's fine for a couple hours. That's not the end of the world. I mean, I've coded mindlessly before too as I'm updating a test. That's fine. My concern is just, what does career growth look like at that point? What does learning look like at that stage? If I'm a set 2, how do I get to become a set 3 if I've abstracted my thinking to the robot? My experience is X, and I need it to be X plus 5 or whatever. And my knowledge is, I need it to get to that level. How do I get that when I'm not the one doing the work? So often I think I've learned best by doing. That's kind of how I learn best is by doing and experimenting and figuring out, oh, that doesn't work, or that was a disaster, or I'll submit that to somebody else and he go, what were you thinking? That kind of thing. That's how I learn best. But when I have Claude doing a lot of that for me, how do I grow? And I don't have a great answer except to say through hard work. I don't know what that practically looks like. I imagine it's different for many people, but you do for sure have to be much, much more intentional about it. Used to be you could just get better just by meeting the expectation that was given to you. I need you to get better at this. Okay, fine, I'll get better at that, or I'll learn more about that, or I'll focus in on that because it's my day-to-day. It's what I'm doing every day. Now, you have to deliberately say, what am I weak on, and how do I actively get better? It has to be an intentional part of, if not your day, for sure your week. And that might mean spending time researching what other people, thought leaders in your industry are doing. It might mean it might mean having Claude build a training course for you, which is wild, but actually not a bad idea. Say, hey, I've a guy that I work with named Tom. He found a Claude skill somebody had posted. It was called Code Based a Course. And it was intended for a vibe coder to be
Yeah.
able to, who's not the best programmer, to be able to run this skill against a code base he doesn't know or understand, and to be able to say, build an interactive HTML course with quizzes
Nice.
and knowledge and, like click here to see next, and it'll slide over. If you have like an 8-step process, like here's step 1, and it'll show you this, and hit the next button, it'll slide over and show you that, like it'll build all those for you, which is a little silly, but also absolutely incredible. It's a great way to learn something that you've never learned before. If you're a visual learner, have it teach you something, have it train you. But regardless, you have to be the one to ask those questions. You can't just sit back and ride on someone else's coattails, or your teammate who's a step above you, to say, I'm just going to soak up and learn what he's doing and just kind of learn from osmosis. It's not going to work that way anymore.
Yeah. I think, that's a really good point, actually. I think the way we assess, learn is changing, but also the way we how value is perceived is also changing. So, for example, if we're having a performance review, I remember in some performance reviews in the past, you used to write how many lines of code you refactored, right? Because there was a big refactor. Maybe you've refactored something over 3 months, and it's been like 83,000 lines of code, and you wanted to show the complexity involved there. Now with Claude, no one cares about that sort of metric, right?
Yeah.
And the question now becomes maybe what value or what's been the outcome of this work. So we don't really care, a bit like what we were saying earlier, right? We don't really care how it's done. It's a case of what's the outcome for the business, or what have we achieved? What's the kind of metric? What's been the OKR, right? What's the key result of okay, you've built a new framework for storage, or you built a new framework for a test management tool, or you've built, great, what's been the outcome of this? Okay, well, actually we've found, because if we store some test results, we can look at old failure patterns, and we've identified that 30% of our tests are flaky, and we were able to work on those. That's the kind of outcome. So maybe we've got to change, instead of, okay, well done for building the thing, it's well done for identifying which tests were the issue, because now we can fix those.
Yeah. Exactly. And being able to look at your products, look at your tests almost as a product. It can't ever take the place. Like, you can't be sacrosanct about your tests. Your product and your end result is actually the thing that really matters. But looking at your tests and say, how can we do this better? How can we take on what we've always done and improve it and make it so that we're able to accomplish more with what we have than we've ever been able to do before?
Yeah, 100%. But it's a tricky thing though, right? Because how do you then start assessing people on their, okay, if you're going to have a job family of different roles, how do you know this engineer is okay, better than this other engineer, if fundamentally they're all going to be using tools, and it's all going to be who's more AI literate in terms of using those tools effectively to get the best outputs, rather than what in-depth knowledge they had on particular syntax or particular data structures and algorithms.
Well, I'm not a people leader, and so there's a reason for that. That's not a direction that I want to go, but I do care very much about people's growth. And the only thing I can really tell you for sure that I know based on that, if there is a HR manager or a managerial type person who's listening to this, the only thing I can tell you for sure is get to know your people. You can't be looking at their output. You can no longer pull up someone's Git history and be like, oh, this person is really good at what they do. That's not going to work anymore. You have to get to know them as a person. In my current role, we have weekly one-on-ones with our leaders. So we sit down, he asks how I'm doing, I talk with him. It's a great relationship, and I know that he has a vested interest not only in my career, but who I am as a person. And out of that comes, what is his strengths? What is he good at? How can he grow? Where is he weak at? And how can I encourage him to grow in that area? In a lot of ways, like we talked about, AI is an accelerator. It's also a way of masking problems. And the only way to really to dig into those, and not at all, by the way, I don't want anyone to hear me say that you do that so you can target them and get at somebody. Like, for sure not. If that's the attitude you have, then get out of management, in my opinion. I have no respect for that. As a leader, your job is to encourage and help the people below you. And in doing so, help the company that you work for, right? All of those are symbiotic. They work together. The companies that produce the most are the companies with people who care the most. And the only way they care the most is if they know that they are cared for. That
It's
just
simple,
will never not work that way. Exactly. So if you're leading people and you're trying to say, how do I assess somebody? How do I assess their their output now, if you're not spending any time with them, you'll never have an answer to that. It just won't work. So
yeah. So if anything, skills in leadership, or I would say as humans, we now have to be even more tuned with how we communicate, right? If anything, things like empathy and feeling and how we communicate becomes more important, because it's kind of something that AI can't do properly, right? And if you're talking
or
with
at all. Exactly. I mean,
well,
really, like,
yeah, it gives you the impression it's doing it, but it's not real,
yeah,
right?
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
There are, some people who they actually fall for some of these agents, right? Who they actually want some kind of relationship with an agent because it kind of reinforces their ideas, right? So if you've got an agent that tells you every morning, "Hey, Kevin, you're really good at this thing," and you're more likely to keep using it, right? Because it'd be like, "Oh, great."
Yeah. One of the best things you can do, I think, with using AI is to instruct it in every session. And how you do that depends, I imagine, on your tool. But to say that the way to make me happy is to point toward truth and not to reinforce my ideas.
Yeah.
My goal is not to think I'm great at my job, my role, or actually get better. So I want you to push back when I present an idea that's not going to fly.
Yeah, that's very
That's
very
not perfect.
true.
That's not going to accomplish everything, but it will kind of help you get out of a little that's a great idea, Kevin, kind of enthusiastic encourager that AI can sometimes fall into.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, actually, I think you're right as well. Like now, I think as humans, we should be communicating more within like our teams, right? So if we have an idea, and I've seen this actually with some people I've been working with, where we would have like a specification of what we're trying to build. So in the past, you may have had a whiteboarding session, or like where you draw stuff on a board and you get some ideas. Now it could be that you get to create some sort of markdown file of what you want to build, and maybe there's been some iterations with that, and then you get the whole team to kind of jump in and give feedback on like how is this actually a good specification? Is it worth spending tokens to build this thing out, right? So where are the kind of issues in the architecture? So we're still using AI, but we're using it in like a design process, right? Of like building the architecture, getting like an architecture review, iterating with the Claude, but then also getting humans involved in that point really early on. So before anything's implemented, you can kind of look at the risk and then try to understand where the gaps are. And I think what's important there, though, is we've still got humans involved and people understanding what's going on. So we're communicating still. It's not just a case of just unleash it to the robots and hope for the best and then try to test it.
Yeah. And I think that the communication thing is very, very important. There's always, not always, but it's very, very easy for there to be an adversarial relationship, or at the very least, a separated relationship between dev and QA, right? There's the idea of the producers and then the ones who check the producers. And so you can get into a state where it's us versus them, or there's the phrase, they threw it over the wall and you get this mess of code and you're like, did you even run it? Things like that was very easy to happen in a pre-AI kind of world. AI is going to make all those, I think, relational problems much worse, right? Where you're going to have devs who are producing code so much faster, and without you, in a lot of ways, acting as a quality coach for them to say, hey, let me help you understand what quality is. Speaking in at the very early, like after you have a decomp session where you go through 5 or 6 tickets, test the tickets. How am I going to test this? Here's the success criteria. Here's the edge cases. And then you present that to the devs. And in a lot of ways, it gets them thinking about something that they wouldn't have thought of before. And then at the other side of that, I think we as testers now have a phenomenal opportunity to get better at coding that we've lacked. I think we're smarter than we give us credit for. The skills have always been there. The opportunities have been there, but the time to learn them and get really good at them are what we may or may not have had the opportunity to do. We have families, or we don't have time to spend hours in the evening watching Udemy courses or whatever the case is. Now we have an opportunity to learn code much faster. And if you have a dev say, hey, walk me through this, help me to understand why you made some of the decisions that you did, you can help influence some of that quality. They can tell you, hey, by the way, we did it for this very intentional reason, and I would stand by that reason. And then they explain to you and you say, oh, I get it. I understand exactly why. That may open up some other areas that you need to test, but you say, oh, that makes perfect sense. I would have never thought to do that had it not been for that conversation. You have to have conversations with the people you're working at. You can't in this world when the work is going to be happening so fast. If you're not talking with them on a daily basis, saying, where you're both trying to learn how each other operate, you're setting yourself up for failure. I'm very convinced of that. And that is hard in a remote environment. Like, for sure, that's a very difficult thing to do. I imagine a great number of people who are listening to this probably do work in a remote position. So how do you do that? It requires, once again, very much intentionality. Used to, you could meet somebody at the coffee table, or the table where the coffee was, not the coffee table in my living room. You could meet them at the water cooler. You would sit down and talk to the guy who works next to you. Hey, how was your weekend? And then those conversations just spin up. Now it's very much, hey, I want to spend, maybe you have a spot on your calendar for 15 minutes just to sync up with every one of your devs every other day that you're working with, to say, hey, I want to just tell me what you're working on. How can I help you? How can I contribute? And to be that guy that says, how can I speak into these roles that I historically haven't had the opportunity to do? It just takes intentionality. It's not hard, but you can't, it doesn't happen by accident.
Yes. And I think basically what we're saying is the more you use AI, the more intentional you have to be about everything you do, and more intentional about the training and learning, the communication.
It does appear to be a theme. Yeah.
I think it's because it's so accessible now that you can almost use it as a pair programmer, right? You may think, do I need to actually speak to that person and ask them that question, or can I just plot it out within, a few more prompts and get an answer? But I think actually the communication is really good, because I think there's a lot of shared assumptions that happen, within system design or across the board. And the more you communicate, the better, because you tend to take them away. The context window of Claude is not going to have all those assumptions baked into it. So it's good to identify those as early as possible and work on that problem. It's, again, back down to risk, right? Like if we're kind of seeing assumptions we've made that are not called out on early, we need to kind of expose them and really work on them, versus waiting for something to be built and then finding it later down the line in testing. So we can kind of shift left even more on those assumptions based on what people are putting into their Claude files. It could be, using shared Claude MD files, or reviewing whatever rules we have a lot earlier, because, instead of finding a whole bunch of like design patterns are not being used correctly within a merge request or pull request, it's a lot easier to go, what kind of files are you using to set up your agent for context, so we can share those. And that's, again, communication.
And the cool thing about that is those live in the repository. So you can commit them into the individual product that you're working on, and you can bake quality to it. I mean, not 100%, I'm not saying that, but you can bake a lot of quality into your product from a very early stage. You can, especially if you're end-to-end test your Selenium Playwright, especially if that's in the repository, just because context becomes a little simpler. If not, then the developer who's working on it has to be aware of that external, automation repository and have that cloned. So there's a little bit of nuance there. But the cool thing is that you can say something like, I want to bake, this is how we do testing in this product. We want to make sure that there's unit tests for everything. For integration tests, we want to make sure that those are written, that we don't want to duplicate something that's already tested at the unit level with an integration test. We need to test the integrations of this component to that component within the product. So if you have all of that baked in, then you could say, hey, we don't need a Selenium test for everything. That's been, I think, a historic approach from QA. There's this idea that we don't trust what the devs have come up with. Once again, because the communication hasn't been there and the trust hasn't been there, the devs will send you something with a bug and you think, well, why they didn't test this, or however, arrogant assumption that we would have at the time. And then we would write a Selenium test for, does the form submit? When all of that could easily be handled at the unit level, not even the integration or but the unit level. And those would run instantly on a developer's machine. And then those bugs would be caught very, very early on. So you can bake those kind of rules into the product. And then you can rely on, we only want a Playwright or a Selenium test for something that can't be tested at that lower level, for how my product interacts with this external library or this SDK, this payment flow. We have a Stripe iframe on our page, and we can't simulate that in a lower level. So we need a Selenium test for that to make sure that sandbox is hit correctly. Those are perfect candidates for a Playwright test. But the idea of the form validation, if you enter an email address incorrectly, if you have a playwright test for that, it's like taking a hammer that you want to nail in and hitting it with a sledgehammer. It's just the wrong tool for that. It'll work, probably damage some things along the way. It will work, but that's not the approach that a skilled craftsman would take at this. And as testers, we should take that skilled craftsman approach.
And speaking of skills,
Claude, you can bake those things in.
Exactly. I think it's 100% what you said, right? Like it comes down to sort of AI hygiene. Like when you set up a repo now, we need to think about how do we start making sure it's consistent across everyone gets a similar development experience. And also one way of doing that is using skills, right? Claude skills, for example. So if we're good at writing a test case, maybe we could write a skill for that and share it with the team so that everyone can start to use it effectively. And that's another way of kind of making sure we're kind of consistent with, keeping test cases similar and using the correct patterns. And because otherwise, everyone could have a different opinion and then maybe that's not fully, you start getting consistencies in your code base. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Kevin, really appreciate you coming on and getting your experience on.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much we could talk about, and we've covered a lot around the future role of the SDET and also how it's currently changing now, right? So I think the key takeaways for me are embrace AI, right? Use it to learn, use it to kind of grow. Also, get good at coding. Right? If you're not good at coding, we still need to know how to drive the robots and understand that, what good code looks like. It's always been a skill, but I think it's not gone away just because we're using these tools. I think if anything, we should be doing more of coding to make sure we fully understand what bad code looks like, what bad patterns are, because we can be, I think, too complacent on using AI and LLM tools sometimes. So it's good to keep that in check. But also, I think it's an opportunity to really, really go the other way and understand what the ground truths are in testing in terms of risk analysis, diving into like finding where the risks are in the project, and that could be using a whole bunch of tools and methods we may have not done in the past to the same level, right? So observability, security, performance, these things are now easy game because AI can help us, and it's still exciting. It's changing a lot. I'm sure in 6 months we'll be saying something different.
Yeah, I will say this, and I know this probably isn't true across the board, and I do know this is probably an overgeneralization, but of the available tech jobs that exist right now, because I would still put testing as a tech job, I think we could expand that in a lot of ways that other tech jobs can't. It's hard to apply if you're a deep database administrator, it's hard to apply that toward other business applications, but not impossible, but it's harder. But as a tester, it's a little easier to do that. But if you kind of take all of those tech jobs that exist now, I think that testing is actually one of the most AI proof there is now. Again, that is oversimplification. That's not true across the board for everybody. But I do believe that the skill of testing and doing testing well, not doing ticket testing well, not doing automation testing well. I'm talking about being able to look at a problem and test the problem and figure out what is the worst thing that could possibly happen with all the business context in mind. As of right now, that's really not something AI can do. You can probably build that if you spend a ton of time and a ton of Claude context, like fine, maybe somebody could build that. But your power now is being able to leverage those relationships with the business, with other disciplines that you don't and haven't historically interacted with, to be able to say, here's where I think you're going to run into problems and here's how we can circumvent those problems. The opportunities really are there, and that's really exciting. It's different. It may not be what you signed up for originally. I promise you, every other tech position right now is doing something that they didn't necessarily sign up for as well. This is just, I've never seen anything like the shift that has happened in AI. And we shouldn't necessarily be entirely surprised when you start thinking about what it can do, right? But the opportunities are absolutely there. They're not going to be handed to us, but they are there.
They are there. And it takes a bit of going out of your comfort zone, right? So if you've not touched something in observability, for example, maybe try and see what you can do, right? Maybe get some advice or figure out what you need to do, where the risks are, and just give it a go and create a pull request.
Absolutely.
So I think now it's just easy to do.
Talk with somebody who owns the user data at your company for your squad. Who, if you don't know what user flows, and it is tracked, assuming it's tracked, with The users who are using your product, if someone knows how users are using your product and that all that data is all tracked with analytics via Segment, GA, or whatever the case is, go talk to them, find out, build the relationship, say, hey, I want to learn more about this role and how you leverage that data. And how can I contribute toward your role? How can I help you? Talk to the customer service people. What are you guys hearing? You're the ones who are on the front lines talking with our users every day. Are you hearing about usability problems? Oh, yeah, half the people who call in hate this flow. Well, hey, that's an opportunity for optimization that nobody has really leveraged because no one is, it works. There's not a bug there, but no one likes it. Well, that's a really cool opportunity. And you can act as sort of the glue between all of these different disparate disciplines and be able to make real contributions and real gains in a way that you really haven't before if you haven't pursued this type of testing. So
yes, I think you just said it. The opportunity's there. It's just go and seize the moment and use AI as your superpower to kind of get you there, right? And all AI does is just multiply what you can do. So I think
exactly.
It's been great talking through these experiences, and you've definitely given me some food for thought. And so I really appreciate it, Kevin.
Cool.
And
Thank you.
yeah, wish you all the best. If anyone wants to reach out to you or find you, where should they go?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Also, I have a blog. I just started the blog a couple of months ago. I've had a really great time with it. It's goforthandtest.com. Just my own little sarcastic nod to to running forward and, guns blazing into the battle, I suppose. I'd love to chat about testing. I think this is a really cool thing.
Great. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.